And so I have the bad news of this video. The bad news is that you are AI, and I think we've established that over this conversation. You are already an AI. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Javier with The Real Javier Novoa, channel, a platform, and a modality where we teach and apply the principles of interiorism to living free. And I hope you understand from the outset that when I say living free, as we know from life, we don't have to go into any spiritual teaching at all. Even the richest people, the people with the most money in their bank accounts, are constantly worrying most of the time because nothing is certain in this physical plane. Absolutely nothing. It just comes to you with observation. If you've lived on this earth for 20 years, you know, maybe it'll take for some of you 30 years, but you know that nothing is certain. Nothing is given. There are always phenomena that are going to happen that are going to sort of tip the apple cart, so to speak. So security, peace, prosperity, hope, wealth cannot be found solely on the physical plane. Now, of course, it's going to manifest on the physical plane. There are physical things that you can do, and this channel's all about giving you the tools for that. But today I want to go deeply into the ultimate. This is going to be a deep dive, and this video is going to be a deep dive for those of you who want to wake up. And even those of you who are awake to it, you're going to get a lot out of this video. So for those of you who don't want to wake up to the reality, for those of you who want to remain in the illusion, then go back to sleep. You're not ready. Very soon, you're going to be woken up as a matter of necessity. But for now, you can turn this video off. But for those of you who want to go deep, who want to wake up, this video is going to be for you. And we hear a lot of late, guys, about the AI revolution. You can't turn on any of your devices. I know I can't turn on my phone without getting some article about how quantum computing has just made another massive leap, about how AI is going to take all of our jobs. Artificial general intelligence could arrive as early as 2026. The singularity. But not all scientists agree. What the heck is that even? AI is changing everything. Here's how to stand out as a thought leader. Branding ahead of AI. You'd better beat it. China's autonomous agent Manu changes everything. This is just now, by the way, a revolutionary AI agent capable of independent thought and action. What happens when artificial intelligence stops asking for permission and starts making its own decisions? Just 12 months away from the singularity. Expert finds shocking secret behind AI code. Well, it's clear that AI probably wrote that title, but the singularity has been discussed for years. A recent macro report by AI Multiple, which analyzed over 8,590 projects given by industry leaders and scientists, concluded timelines for attaining artificial general intelligence have plummeted. Recent breakthroughs make it as easy as 2040 or 2030, as recent as 2040 or 2030. All of our jobs. And if you look at even the interviews we've done, you see that many of these gentlemen have said as much, that the job landscape is going to change.
And in the flat business, there's no supervision anymore. There's no ego. There's no place for I am the boss. There's no place for I am the worker. There's a requirement for what would have been previously the worker to step up and say, I can contribute. And there's a place for what would have been the boss previously to say, I need to listen to the contribution.
Well, certainly that old
I
energy
call
is
that
still there, no?
Say again.
Like there are certainly still big businesses like Walmart, like McDonald's that are in that old energy. But what you're saying is that is going away, not necessarily that it's not still there now.
But they're dead.
They're dead.
So look around. What happened to Sears? What happened to Border Books? What happened to Blockbuster? What happened to Circuit City? All hierarchies, all dead. The world doesn't have a place for these places. So a Walmart or a 3M can still exist in this world for now because they can get away with it. They have so much cash, but they won't last. And so we're moving from a centralized world to a decentralized world, thank goodness. And a different type of corporate structure is required for that. So if anyone listens to me and says, yeah, what the hell do you know? You're just Trevor G. Blake. Then read Elon Musk's biography. Sure. We discussed that in the last interview. Here's a guy who gets it. Here's a guy, and whether you like him or hate him doesn't matter. Who cares? I mean, who has a right to judge? But here's a guy who doesn't pay homage to the king and queen anymore. And here's a guy who says, I can make this happen. Me, one person, can make this happen. And that's the new world. That's the world we live in. And so for me...
You see the big organization giving way to smaller organizations. Trevor Blake, for example, said that the top-down model is dead. Within a few years, all of the top-down companies, they won't be able to compete because it's just such a large behemoth and they're not able to move quickly. Do you see that happening?
Yeah.
In general?
Yeah, in general. I think the latest estimation I saw is that 85% of the American workforce is going to be subcontract.
Wow.
You're going to work for a project, not for a company.
Exactly.
So, and don't shoot the messenger. And that's not right or wrong. It just, that's what's happening.
And even Elon Musk has been saying for years that humans are not going to be able to find meaning because there are not going to be any jobs, or at least there's not going to be the necessity of working. And
we'll
I
have
think
first time something that is smarter than the smartest human, and that, I mean, it's hard to say exactly what that moment is, but there will come a point where no job is needed. You can have a job if you want to have a job for sort of personal satisfaction, but the AI will be able to do everything. So I don't know if that makes people comfortable or uncomfortable. It's hard, when there's new technology, it tends to usually follow an S curve. In this case, we're going to be on the exponential portion of the S curve for a long time, and you'll be able to ask for anything. It won't be, and we won't have universal basic income. We'll have universal high income. So in some sense, it'll be somewhat of a leveler, or an equalizer. Because really, I think everyone will have access to this magic genie.
Of working, and I think some of these claims are exaggerated, but take them as you will, a great change is coming. It's unavoidable. And if you want a very prescient expose of the most extreme position of this, look at the great spiritual teacher Krishnamurti. This is him talking about computers, ladies and gentlemen, I believe almost 40 years ago, or over 40 years ago. Listen to how prescient and true his words ring. And of course,
if we are not capable of that, the computer, which is much more capable, more rapid, more accurate, is going to take over the activities of the brain. Right? See the importance of this, please. This is not something casual. This is very, very serious. Desperately serious. That the computer can invent a new religion. It can be programmed by an expert Hindu scholar, by the Catholic, by the Protestant, by the Muslim, and it will turn out a marvelous structure of a new religion. And if we are not at all aware of what is happening, we'll follow that new programmed structure which has been put forward by the computer. See the seriousness of all this, please. So our consciousness has been programmed for thousands and thousands of years. And we have been conditioned, programmed, wired, if you like to put it that way, to think as individuals, to think as separate entities struggling, conflict from the moment you're born till you die. We are programmed to that. We have accepted that. We have never challenged, we have never asked if it is possible to live a life totally, absolutely without conflict. All our thinking. There's another question arises from this, which is the computers are taking over all our thinking. They outstrip man. They're going to, or already have done. They think much faster. They can learn and unlearn. And so keep on learning and discover that their learning is not complete and learn further. Which means they are being programmed by experts, and the machines, these computers, can learn not only from the professors, from the programmers, but from themselves. Probably you know about, some of you know about it, read about it. We have talked to some experts on computers, and within 10 years they say they are outstripped completely man. Will think faster, learn faster, correct themselves, perhaps invent something new theories which man has not thought of. So
And that's happening now, by
this
the way.
is a very important problem for man. Of course, the computers cannot look at the stars and enjoy the stars. They can compose, perhaps not like Beethoven. Perhaps they do not know what love is. But neither do we. So there is this machine which is ultra intellectual machine, ultra intellectual machine it's called. They are inventing this. It's so rapid. So what becomes of man? You understand? Look at the problem, please. Face the problems. What happens to us who have lived by exercising our brain, whatever little part of that brain is, and that little part is being taken over by a machine which is Superman brain, then what happens to each one of us? What happens to our brain, which is no longer being employed as a thinking machine. I want you to follow all this. I'm afraid you don't.
Now, here's the deeper layer, ladies and gentlemen, to this onion. We're not going to a future in which we're living in a simulation. And of course, the great David Icke talks about the fact that as we get nearer to the end of this simulation, the simulation starts to mimic the reality of the simulation itself. Give this a listen.
Holographic reality, the physical that isn't, and how we can appear to be experiencing a world of solidity when it's nothing of the kind. And I'm going to start with a quote. We are perceivers. We are awareness. We are not objects. We have no solidity. We are boundless. We, or rather our reason, forget this. And thus we entrap the totality of ourselves in a vicious circle from which we rarely emerge in our lifetime. So, if we are perceivers, I say we are, if we are boundless, then how come we are experiencing an apparent physical world? So, we're having multiple experiences at the same time. We exist and experience over multiple dimensions at the same time. But the one we are actually aware of that seems real is this one. As the brain decodes this waveform information into what appears to be this solid world. And this is a quote. And what's kind of interesting about this, to me anyway, is how long ago it was stated. It's by a mystic, a Sufi mystic called Rumi, very well known in esoteric circles. And he lived between 1207 and 1273. And yet, although we are supposed to progress with the passage of what we call time, so we become more and more knowledgeable and we're at the cutting edge of human evolution, the very fundamentals of understanding human reality were known way back and have been forgotten. I say systematically forgotten by those that don't want us to know the true nature of reality. Anyway, this is what Rumi said all those centuries ago. This place is a dream. Only the sleeper considers it real. Then death comes like dawn and you wake up laughing at what you thought was your grief. And that absolutely sums up the situation of how humanity has had its perception of life, its perception of reality, so skewed that we're living a reality that is not even close to the one that we think we're experiencing. It was a near-death experiencer who said that being, really truly alive when officially you're dead. So when you leave the body, that's when he said it felt like life, true life, and death was almost returning to the body, not leaving it, which is kind of an inversion of reality that you find all the time. But here's a fantastic quote from a near-death experiencer who is describing what reality is like when they've left the body. And what does that mean? They've left the vehicle that is decoding information into this holographic illusion of physicality. And this is what he said. Everything from the beginning, my birth, my ancestors, my children, my wife, everything comes together simultaneously. I saw everything about me and about everyone who was around me. I saw everything they were thinking now, what they thought then, what was happening before, what was happening now. There is no time. There is no sequence of events. No such thing as limitation of distance, of period, of place. I could be anywhere I wanted to be simultaneously. So that is our true state. And the reason that we experience this world of such apparent limitation is the way our perceptions influence the way we decode reality. And the power of the mind to influence that reality is phenomenal. Think of a dream when you jump off a cliff or you fall off a cliff. What happens? You wake up. Oh, God. Oh, no. And you realize, oh, it's just a dream. But you jump off a cliff in this non-physical holographic reality, which is just not a dream, and you don't wake up as you do from the dreams that we perceive as dreams. You're dead. How come? How can we be physically affected in a non-physical world? And this comes back to the power of the mind. Remember in the Matrix movie, the first one, Neo is being taken through a series of exercises, tests, to try to get him to overcome the perceptual limitations of believing he's in a physical world, even though he's not. And they had him trying to jump between buildings. And if you believed that or understood that it was all an illusion, then you were able to do that. If you didn't, you weren't able to do that. Why? Because you didn't believe it was possible. Take, for instance, the experience of firewalking. You walk through fire in a state of perception that you're going to get burned. Someone will be calling an ambulance very quickly. But you can, people do, walk through fire in other states
This
of
is empirically
perceptual-
verifiable, guys. Happens
perceptional
all the
belief.
time.
that they're not going to get burned, and they walk through fire and don't get burned, because an illusion can only burn an illusion if you believe it can and decode that reality. So in this Matrix movie, when they brought Neo back out of this computer program that he was trying to jump across buildings to overcome the belief that it was real, he had blood coming from his mouth. And he said, if this is all an illusion, what's this? And the Morpheus character said that your mind makes it real. The body cannot exist without the mind. Now, why is that? It's because the body is the mind.
The body is the mind.
The body is just a decoded, holographic expression of the mind. Yes, even the body, everything is holographic. Therefore, we are decoding the energetic fields that we call the body, the information fields, the waveform fields, into the very body that we think we're inhabiting. And our perceptions will dictate the nature of how we do that and how we experience that body. It's a biological computer. It can be manipulated as computers can be manipulated to process information in a different way, control the information that is processed. That's the censorship. But you go to the next level and you are literally changing the way the brain processes information from within. One of the great manipulative techniques is to sell the idea of inevitability. If you think something's inevitable, then you move from not having it to, well, how can we mitigate its impact? And that's the soft sell. We have this global cult, a global network of secret societies that is driving the direction of human society way beyond presidents. What I started to realize is that this reality is actually a simulation. It's a incredibly advanced version of a virtual reality game.
So with these goggles and so on, and even body augmentation, we're reaching a point at where the simulation is actually mimicking the reality of the simulation. And even, it's interesting, if you watch The Matrix, when he gets to the controller of the simulation, he himself is in the simulation. It's simulations overlaid by simulations. And of course, spirituality and religion, I'll say religion because spirituality does point to and lead to truth. Religion gives you a partial truth, because what religion wants to do is say, okay, you're in a simulation, but it doesn't give you the way out. It says the way out is just to obey my authority, which of course are the, shall we say, energy vampires that are sucking your energy so that they can live better in their simulation. And then you'll get out of the simulation, but you just realize you continue in that circle. So on this channel, we want to give you the actual way out. So this video is not bad news. On the contrary, we're giving you the way out, and when you see the way out, you'll see how to be free. But the future is now, ladies and gentlemen. And again, we don't even have to resort to religion. I don't have to resort even to spirituality or woo-woo for this, because many scientists are discovering as much. TK.
This could be some simulation.
It could. Do you entertain that?
Well, the argument for the simulation, I think, is quite strong, because if you assume any improvement at all over time, any improvement, 1%, 0.1%, just extend the time frame, make it 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. Civilization, if you count it, if you're very generous, civilization is maybe 7,000 or 8,000 years old, if you count it from the first writing. This is nothing. This is nothing. So,
Probably not true, but that just makes his argument stronger if it wasn't true.
Then games will be indistinguishable from reality. Or civilization will end. One of those two things will occur.
Think about this. Games will be indistinguishable from reality, which, as we already know, it is a huge game, and it always has been.
Therefore, we are most likely in a simulation.
Try to solve the value alignment
And this is
problem for
another
multiple
scientist,
agents.
Roman
And the solution to avoid
Yampolsky,
compromise is to give
computer
everyone a
engineering.
personal virtual universe. You can do whatever you want in that world. You could be king, you could be slave, you decide what happens. So it's basically a glorified video game where you get to enjoy yourself and someone else takes care of your needs, and the substrate alignment is the only
This
thing
is
we need to
exactly
solve.
what we
don't
say,
have to
by the
get
way.
8 billion humans to agree on anything.
So, okay, so why is that not a likely outcome? Why can't AI systems create video games for us to lose ourselves in, each with an individual video game universe?
Some people say that's what happened. We're in a simulation.
Some people say that's
And
already
we're playing
happening.
that video game. And now we're creating, what? Maybe we're creating artificial threats for ourselves to be scared about, because fear is really exciting. It allows us to play the video game more vigorously.
Of course
And
we are.
some people choose to play on a more difficult level with more constraints. Some say, okay, I'm just going to enjoy the game, high privilege level. Absolutely.
So, okay, what was that paper on multi-agent value alignment?
Personal universes. Personal universes.
So that's one of the possible outcomes. But what in general is the idea of the paper? So it's looking at multiple agents that are human AI.
That we exist at exactly like the most interesting 20, 30 years in the history of this civilization. It's been around for 15 billion years.
Yeah.
And that here we are.
What's the probability that we'll live in a simulation?
I know never to say 100%, but pretty close to that.
And this is not a woo-woo guy. This is a serious computer scientist
I have a paper
guy.
about that. This is just the first page teaser, but it's like a nice 30-page document. I'm still here, but yes.
How to Hack the Simulation is the title.
I spend a lot of time thinking about that. That would be something I would want superintelligence to help us with, and that's exactly what the paper is about. We used AI boxing.
Ask an AGI system, and he said he would ask what's outside the simulation. That's a really good question to ask. Conjectured that the humankind is simulated along with the rest of the physical universe. It reads, many researchers have conjectured that the humankind is simulated along with the rest of the physical universe. In this paper, we do not evaluate evidence for or against such a claim, but instead ask a computer science question, namely, can we hack it? More formally, the question could be phrased as, could generally
And of course the
intelligent
answer would
agents
be
placed in
no,
virtual
because you can't hack the simulation from within the simulation, but you can definitely go outside of it immediately. We're going to talk about that in this video. So the AI system and the matrix, so to speak, the simulation is very complex. What's science all about? Science is about finding those leverage points where you can push one point or a set of points and affect the whole system. We want to find that point where we can actually simply put pressure on that point, or as you'll see, observe that point, and then immediately be out of the whole complexity of that matrix. Otherwise, it's just an eternal maze. And the systems of today, whether religion, whether of government, whether of authority, are there and designed to keep you in the maze of that matrix. And it's at this point where I have occasion to sort of dedicate this video. You see, as a young teenager, as a young child, I've always been attracted to these spiritual aspects. And of course, it expressed itself in religion. At first, I got very involved in the religion of my birth. I explored other religions. But when I became a young teenager, I had occasion to explore the whole New Age movement. And of course, that was when it was really in its apex back in the 90s. And I listened to like Deva Premal, and I explored many gurus and so on, much to the dismay of my family. And they sort of steered me away from that. And then, of course, I explored more conventional religions. But I did see many books on the bookshelf by the great author Eckhart Tolle. And I eventually did read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And that was in a period in my 20s when I was sort of migrating out of organized religion. I was looking for deeper spirituality. I saw that most organized religion was simply still in the matrix. It was still in that simulation. And I discovered the book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I read it. And it was that point also that I studied meditation. So Eckhart Tolle has played a pivotal role in my journey of awakening. And of course, remember, anyone who says they're awakened is a liar, because that's just ego, which we'll talk about. We're all awakening. I read The Power of Now. And it so happens that a few months ago, Oprah Winfrey, who's deeply spiritual and who has a show about spirituality and a great book club where she recommends a lot of spiritual books, Oprah Winfrey in her book club recommended a book for the second time in the first time in the history of that book club, and that was A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. And that was also a book that I read during that period. It is a very interesting book because it charts the evolution of humanity through this spiritual lens. And it points to, ladies and gentlemen, the leverage point whereby if we see that, we will be able to extirpate ourselves from this simulation, from this AI, very quickly. And so, I have the bad news of this video. The bad news is that you are AI, and I think we've established that over this conversation. You are already an AI. And of course, the essence or the nucleus of that AI is the ego. And in this book, A New Earth, and in many of his other writings, Eckhart Tolle describes what the ego is. And when you know what the ego is, you'll be able to very easily observe it and therefore dissolve it, and then you're no longer in the simulation. Here are a few passages from A New Earth where Eckhart Tolle talks about the evolution and shift in consciousness of humanity. He says, "A new species is arising on the planet. It is arising now, and you are it. On awakening from the ego," he says, "the most important step in your journey toward enlightenment is this: learn to disidentify from your mind. Every time you create a gap in the stream of your thinking, the light of your consciousness grows stronger." And we're going to touch on this later when we talk about the ego. On collective awakening, the awakening of all humankind, he says, "Humanity is now faced with a stark choice: evolve or die. If the structures of the human mind remain unchanged, we will always end up recreating the same world, the same evils, the same dysfunction." On being present, he says, awareness is the greatest agent for change. The primary cause of unhappiness is never the situation, as the Stoics say, but your thoughts about it. Be aware of the thoughts you are thinking. Separate them from the situation, which is always neutral. It is as it is. So here are just a few passages from Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth on the ego, basically pointing out that one area that if we observe it, then we have the key to freedom from the AI matrix. He says, the ego wants to want more than it wants to have. Notice that. So the ego would rather want than have. The key being that having things and acquiring things are not ego, as long as there's not worry behind it, and we'll go into that more. And of course, this is my Javier's interpretation of this. Eckhart also says, the ego is always on guard against any kind of perceived diminishment. Automatic ego repair mechanisms come into effect to restore the mental form of me. When someone blames or criticizes me, that diminishment is felt as a morally serious threat. He goes on to say, ego is no more than this: identification with form, which primarily means thought forms, because, and this is my comment, we know all is thought. These are some statements of Eckhart for how to free ourselves from the ego, which we're going to talk about in more detail in this video. The primary cause of unhappiness is never the situation, but your thoughts about it. Be aware of the thoughts you're thinking. He also says, make it a habit to ask yourself, what's going on inside me at this moment? That question will point you in the right direction. But don't analyze, just watch. And I repeat, he says, the question, what's going on inside me at this moment, will point you in the right direction. But do not analyze, just watch. And then he says, rather than being your thoughts and emotions, be the awareness behind it. He then goes on to elucidate some of the signs of the ego. He says in A New Earth, complaining is one of the ego's favorite strategies for strengthening itself. Every complaint is a little story the mind makes up that you completely believe in. It's funny, we completely believe in our thoughts. Whenever you feel superior or inferior to anyone, that's the ego in you. He also says, ego takes everything personally. It either feels offended, diminished, or aggrandized because it is looking for itself in everything. And he says, as long as you make an identity for yourself out of pain, you cannot be free of it. So I want to drive ego home, or the concept of ego, so that you can understand it, so that you can observe it, and then so that you can find your way to the true self. And the ego is, of course, in contradistinction to the true self, but it is not outside the true self, ladies and gentlemen, because remember, as we know, there's only one true being. So therefore, the ego is within that true being. Therefore, there's no good or bad. So ego's not good or bad. The matrix and the AI is not good or bad. It simply is.